And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to Story Live Jaqui Winston, and Jaqui writes professional CVs. So Jaqui, very, very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining me today. How's things with you where you are in your part of the world?
Things are very busy in my part of the world. The world of CV writing is highly in demand at the moment, I would think is safe to say.
Sure.
And yeah, it's not necessarily all good, because obviously a lot of people have been made redundant, and that's been a growth area for me, talking to people who are redundant. But it's good to have the experience and to be able to offer them advice about what to do with their CVs.
I guess it brings a different energy, doesn't it? Whereas if they're coming to a CV because they're excited to be off applying for new jobs, that's a very different place to be in than
Definitely.
to be into.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's the impetus for coming to a CV writer out of choice is very much a more relaxed process.
Yes, yeah.
People are saying, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm thinking about looking for something new. Whereas when you've got people who have been forced into a situation and there are underlying emotions that go with it, be it grief, anger, loss of confidence, etc., that really changes the conversation.
Yeah.
And I have to be very mindful of that.
Yeah, and also a sense of desperation. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever been there, but I've certainly been there in past lives of thinking, oh my God, I've got to get a job, I've got to get one quickly.
Yes.
And that's a horrid, the reality is that perhaps you don't need to be in that panicky place, but it does feel like that at the time, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Let's just backtrack a minute, Jaqui, because I always like to reflect on how I've met or come across people that I interview on Story Lives, and we haven't actually met either in person or indeed we haven't been at the same meeting or anything, but
no.
We met through a mutual connection, didn't we?
Yes.
Through the Athena network, somebody
Absolutely.
did that, because we're kind of both in the business of stories, aren't we? But in a very different way.
Yes. Yeah.
And certainly I've been able to pass a few people your way that I've come across, which I'm always happy to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it was that mutual sense of unpicking what somebody's story is in order to be able to help them is that sort of common ground.
Yes, so that's our kind of shared skill. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jaqui, to explain more fully. Clearly you can see from your background that you write professional CVs, but I'm always interested in the backstory, that how did you come to be doing this?
Okay, well, career number one was in sales and marketing. I was in the TV post-production industry, and I fell into that because I did a degree in the northeast of England, loved the place and wanted to stay. And my passion was art history, but there weren't many art history jobs in Newcastle in the 80s. So yeah, discovered that I was good at sales, had a lot of very good training, and decades later found I was still in sales. I moved out of press advertising into video post-production and worked in London for a long time. But it was interesting, the arrival of baby number one created a natural break in that career path. And I reflected that I wasn't actually sure that I was the salesperson that I defined myself as for all those years. I was good at it, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it as much as I thought I had. And maybe it was a young person's job because there was a lot of entertaining involved and a lot of travel. But yes, having the career break was good because I did keep my hand in. I had a part-time role in marketing for the same company for a long time. But what really sort of tipped it over was doing lots of voluntary things with my children's school, and being around very talented women who were helping in voluntary positions and couldn't get interviews to get back into the workplace. And I am thinking there must be a communication breakdown here, because they are very talented, very able, and have held down extremely good jobs. And if they can't get an interview in their own field, there must be something wrong. So in summary, somebody challenged me to write in the CV, which I'm always up for a challenge. So I took the challenge. I did lots of research about what a modern CV entailed, and I wrote her a CV, and she got interviews and got a job. And it was that immediate. I was so thrilled that I could make that difference to somebody who had genuinely been stuck. That was 2013, and from that point to now, it's grown a lot as a business, but also my skill set, my knowledge of different types of industry and roles, but also the recruitment process has changed enormously in that period of time, because there's so much AI involved now. So one has to be a sort of whiz on keywords as much as being able to write about somebody in a compelling way.
Yes, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Because the talent and the ability of that woman who was your transition woman altered. It was just how she was presenting herself. And interesting what you say about AI. I remember my daughter, when she, straight out of uni, was applying for jobs. And she was really struggling. She was applying to these big companies that offered graduate schemes, and she's got a first-class degree. She's a well-balanced individual. We couldn't work out why she wasn't getting interviews. And actually, I think in the end, I sort of called it out a little bit like you did, saying, well, there's got to be something wrong here with your CV. Because, and what happened was that a friend who's in HR looked at it, and because, of course, she was 22, 23 at the time, her last job was as senior waitress for a catering company she'd worked for throughout school and uni. Of course, therefore, the AI scanning systems were bringing that up as her last job, and of course, wasn't appropriate to the job she was applying for. So it's it was such a small thing, and in the end, the job she did get was with a company small enough that didn't use AI systems, and they actually read her CV.
Yeah, that's key, actually. If you can put in front of a human reader this in what is a very much a buyer's market at the moment, it definitely helps. And the other thing is actually thinking about your CV as a sales document, because you're actually selling brand you. And I always use the analogy of Nike. They don't say we sell trainers, they say we sell lifestyle, aspiration, cool, and all that kind of stuff. So if you transpose that into a CV and think, you could say I was a waitress, or you could say I excelled at customer service and adding value to people's experience.
Yes.
Very much the same thing, but said in a totally different way.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, in your early 20s, you haven't got a clue about that, have you? And
absolutely.
But to be fair, most of us wouldn't, unless we've been, I would like to think that I'd have a bit more idea now, because I understand that in terms of my own business, but most people wouldn't if they've been in paid employment all their lives.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a bold question here, Jackie. What sort of percentage of people that you write CVs for go on to get interviews? Because it's not the CV that's going to get them the job, is it? They've got to do well at interview.
Yeah.
The is to bridge that gap of getting the interview.
Yeah. I wish I could answer that question. I used to be able to, because when my business was much smaller and I had, I suppose, more time after the effect with people, and I always follow up and I get them to fill in a questionnaire as to how it went. But a lot of people move on very quickly, and I can, unless I don't want to hound them, but unless I do, I would never get that answer to the question. So I don't know anymore. It used to be a very high percent when I did have that discussion, and it was because I suppose I'd added a level of confidence as well as the actual physical CV, which meant that people would apply for perhaps more jobs and apply for them with a cover letter that was more bold about their own ability to do the job they're going for. Because the other thing I do is help people with cover letters, which is a key part of the application process, which people very frequently get wrong. So yes, in short, I don't know, but I do know that I do get a lot of positive feedback when people do have that eureka moment. I got a job within a month, I got an interview, and then straight away got the job. So from that point of view, I must be doing something right, which is good. But I suppose the other thing is, in the new market with the dearth of jobs and excess of people applying, I think that statistic will naturally go down, unfortunately, until things rebalance themselves.
Yes, just because of sheer numbers involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to something that you said too about your sales career, because you had that for a long time, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And you were very good at it. But sometimes we can go down, it probably wasn't the wrong alley for you, in that, as you say, as a younger person that brought a lovely lifestyle with it, and on and so on.
Yeah.
Well, the two things popped up to me when you were talking about that. One was that your sort of natural time to stop and reflect was because you took time off for childcare. But actually, if people are able to see that about being forced to change jobs, and I know they can't because of all the other emotions that go with it, and I completely that, particularly if they were attached to their job, felt mistreated and all of that sort of thing. But actually, any interruption to our flow or pattern, if we can choose to see it in that way and see, actually, this is a time to reflect. What do I want to do? Do I want another job that's similar to the one I've had before? Do I want to become self-employed? Do I want to do something completely different? Having that time to reflect is quite a gift. But the other thing that I wanted to reflect on was that thing about it isn't always that thing that we're good at isn't always the thing that we're brought on this earth to do, is it?
Absolutely. And I think that was when I reflect back now at my journey, if I had been that art historian at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, I'm sure I would have been very fulfilled. However, I was a salesperson and I was good at it, and I contributed to the success of the businesses that I work with. But the reflection was, did it actually make me happy in a way that I would like to have it put on my gravestone, you know, she was a great salesperson? And I think the answer was, no, it didn't. But when you're in it, you can't see it. No. When you step outside, as you said, and then you look and think, okay, what should I do now I'm going back into the workplace? And funnily enough, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to go back into sales. And I suppose yes, it's a culmination of a lot of things that come together, but that eureka moment of me finding the CV thing was purely accidental. But what's happened since then is that I've realized the genuine joy that I get every time somebody says, thank you. I can see me in that document in a way that I would never have described myself, but I would give me a job, you know, and I get those kind of comments and I think, that's brilliant. It gives me such a thrill, and it's a bigger and more fulfilling thrill than you've just won a £500,000 contract with a production company for X, Y, or Z, because obviously that was a sort of commission-based thing, but it wasn't actually helping an individual, and I think that's the difference. Yeah,
I completely get that. And I'm kind of with you on that thing of the thrill that you get when somebody has done well. I get such a thrill when somebody has that I've helped with a talk comes back to me and says, oh, it went really well. I used to, I mean, we're both members of Athena, and I used to belong to a different network that was run on similar lines to Athena, but it was a mixed group, and it was an independent group, just the one group. And there used to be a weekly competition for a bottle of wine for the best minute, the best networking minute. And of course it was great when I won it myself, but actually the pleasure in somebody that had just come on my course winning it following that was even greater. Because in a sense, because I coached on presentation skills, shame on me if I couldn't win that bottle of wine occasionally. But to have somebody else that I have helped and see them struggling with it beforehand, and knowing what that must feel like for them to think, I've won the wine. You know, was fabulous. And you know, you're right. I mean, I'm not knocking sales, because we all need it. Not only do we need it in our business, but we need those TV production companies. We do sales and all of that. And there'll be enough in there to fuel some people's lives. We're all made differently. But to know that you've made a difference to an individual and therefore potentially a family and all of those things, is tremendous, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is that the sales isn't or wasn't a waste of time in any way, because actually one of the things that I did in that career is I went from being the salesperson to being the team manager, and I would be recruiting people for my team. And I look back now and I think I use my sales skills in describing people, because it's actually describing the benefits of a person on a CV, in as much as when you're selling something, you are selling benefits, not a thing.
Yes.
And also the fact that I know what it's like to be sitting on the other side. And if you get a CV sitting in front of you with poor punctuation, which is my absolute bugbear, and bad sentence construction, and also it's very obviously, you know, they've cut and pasted their job description that they were given by their employer into their CV. They haven't even bothered to change the tense and things like that. Just in the no pile. And I get those all the time as my starting point. And people go, you know, I've got a CV, it just needs a bit of a tweak. And I say, actually, it needs a lot more of a tweak, because it's not actually doing the job that the CV needs to do, which is selling brand new. And that's the key message I try and get across to people, which is why what I do is very collaborative. There is no sense of send me a CV, I will ingest it and I will spit it back out at you. There's an awful lot of conversations go on, because I also want to sound authentically like the person. There is a tone of voice for CV which is fairly neutral, but there's still got to be a sense of who they are. And if you don't capture that, then it's very obviously written for them as well.
Yes, yes. Interesting. And also, I mean, I think, I guess you talked, I think this might have been before we came on air, actually, that you were talking about the amount of research that you do into the sort of jobs they might be applying for, and matching the way the CV is worded to what that job is looking for. And I guess that you had to do similar sorts of research into the companies that you were hoping were going to buy your products.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That meticulous research, and
it's the research is key. The really understanding what people genuinely want, as opposed to what they say they want, which can often be different things. But also the CV project with a client is a kind of speed version of what I did in sales previously, because it's all about relationship building. And if you can't build those relationships with your client, then you won't get each other, and you can never take it to the next stage. And when I was selling in post-production or anything else, it was about long-term relationship building and account management, and really sort of looking at it as long-term. My job now is to really get under the skin of that person as quickly as possible, build those relationships and the trust, because people need to tell me stuff that they might not want to publish, but I need to understand why something happened, and therefore how we're going to package it.
yes.
All of that has to happen very quickly. And I've often said to my clients that the younger me could not have done this job. Okay. Because I think being a more mature person and having that sense of empathy with people, and being able to talk as a peer to a senior person in a big company, or talk as an experienced person to a graduate, because I do a lot of graduate work as well. That the me that I am now is the better version of the person that can do that. And the younger me would have probably struggled with the more senior people, because I would have been looking up at them, and that's not a way of building that kind of relationship.
Yes, yes. No, that's a very good point, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So, and do you then, if somebody, I mean, what do you need? Where do you need somebody to be at the point they come to you? Do they need to know exactly what kind of job they want to go for, or can you guide them according to their skill set of the sort of things they could be successful at?
I like people to be clear about where they're going. If they need that kind of coaching, then I do refer them to coaches who specialize in that. I'm very clear about where the boundary is around what I do. So I will challenge them and say, send me link to the kind of things you're applying for, so I can see that we are speaking the same language, because they might, if they say I'm looking for a job in X, but they send me job descriptions of something completely different, I think, okay, we have a mismatch here. And it's really important, because of AI's involvement in recruitment, that you are able to identify what the key words are for a particular role or industry. And if you can't, then if it's going to be ingested into an ATS system, which is an applicant tracking system, it will be invisible if it's not got the right keywords. So another reason for sending me the links to the kind of jobs, because there will be a commonality of language that runs through them all, and therefore I can grasp what those are and make sure that we're actually using the right language. It's made it more complicated, because there's a line between over using keywords and using the right keywords. And people, it's like on LinkedIn as well, if people are job seeking on LinkedIn, they need to make sure their profile has got the right keywords throughout it to be visible to the recruiters who are using LinkedIn. But if it's so packed with keywords that it's almost unreadable, then you will turn off the human reader as soon as they get there. So it's a very fine line between the two.
Yeah, no, interesting. And I'm guessing that you're a little bit like me, that one of the things, and again, going back to when my daughter was job hunting, what she was struggling to do was to look back at her own story, as it were, and to see the value of it.
Absolutely.
You know, like questions on job applications are like, where have you displayed leadership roles? And of course, she couldn't see that she'd had that experience, but of course she had, because as I said, she was a senior waitress, and she'd had other jobs. I just say that, yes, but I think, and I don't, I'm guessing young people in particular perhaps do that, but I think other people do as well, don't they?
They are too close to their own subject matter, is the general theme. And by having a completely impartial other set of eyes on their career history, often reveals things to them, as you've just said, I would never have thought of saying it in that way.
Yes.
And I'm saying, I can only reflect back at you what you've told me and what's on your old CV, etc. I'm not making anything up, but it's actually me saying, asking enough questions to realize that in a certain position, the contribution that the person made was far greater than they understood at the time or have understood since.
Yes.
Because then it helps their story. It really helps their sense of progression and how we document that on the CV. But it also, I can see them sometimes, the shoulders go up, you know, then they go, oh yeah. And that's brilliant. It's that sort of giving of the confidence, which takes me full circle to my return to work mum cohort at the beginning. Because the one thing that was running through that group was a total lack of confidence. And I was genuinely shocked about how low that confidence can be. I think I've described it as people feel like they gave birth to a part of their brain or something. And it just isn't like that. Actually probably added more skills through being a mum to those sort of very corporate skills that you may have had previously. So you would go back into the workplace with much more empathy and a more rounded approach to things than that very sort of, this is what I do and this is what defines me, that I think a lot of people think is the only way to be. And I think in the modern recruitment world, that is being more valued than it used to be. People want people with work-life balance. They want them with outside interests and skills, so that they are a whole person.
And I think that what you've just said particularly applies if people have had their 2 or 3 children, or however many they're going to have, and then go back, as opposed perhaps to somebody who's, you know, going to go back while the first child is still a baby, because they've not been out of the workforce that long.
Yes.
But I think you're right. I mean, I remember several years ago, I think it was about 2013, together with somebody else, we ran an event. It was called, I forget what it was called now, Inspiring Women for Work. And it was aimed exactly at that group of people that had taken the break in childcare and had lost confidence and didn't recognise the skill set that they had developed as a home manager.
Yeah.
Massive skill sets of juggling and things, but
Yeah.
people don't own that as a skill or
No.
feel confident in it, it's not going to come across, is it?
It's about how people describe themselves. And I'm not an NLP person, but I have been with enough people who are NLP experts to know that the narrative that we describe for ourselves and discussions you have in your head with yourself about what you are and do really dictates your thinking and how you are perceived externally. So I am just a housewife, or I'm just at home with the kids, is because you know it's an immediate undersales point, and it will come across whether you think you're coming across in that way or not. It will come across in how you present yourself if you've got that narrative going on in your head. So confidence is key. It's really, really important.
Yes, it's interesting because I run an online program and I piloted it back in the autumn. It's all about, sharing stories through speaking. But the first exercise that I included was I included it because it was like putting together a professional or speaker bio. Of course, what it got people doing was looking back at what they're experts in, what they've got the experience in, and you can almost see them, as you've described, sort of stand up and their shoulders go down and think, yeah, I have got this experience and this expertise, because they in the way that I put the exercise together, they was really making them draw on all the things that brought them to where they are today.
Yeah.
And allowing them to own their story, as opposed to, oh, but my stories are boring. It's just how I got to be where I am. It just happened.
It just happened. Exactly. I get that a lot. It just happened. And
Mm.
also, I often get the, but I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or I knew somebody, or whatever it was. And I said, but hang on, put that to one side. Did you or did you not achieve in that job? So then you have to kind of refocus on the thing that actually the recruiter's interested in. The recruiter isn't interested that you might have known somebody. They actually want to know whether you achieved, what you contributed, and therefore they're always thinking, can this person do this in this role?
Yes.
And that's often also forgotten by people who are hung up on their own story and underselling themselves and the excuse for X, Y, or Z. It's back to that narrative thing.
Yeah, it's the value of their stories. Jackie, we could talk for hours, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. Just one final question for you before I invite you to tell you to say how people can connect with you. Is there an average time that it takes you to write a CV, or is the variation so great that you average on it?
Good question. The average, if the flow is there, i.e. I send something out and within a day or two I get a response, I can write a CV within about 10 days. Although at the moment I'm actually started on Monday and I've got to finish tomorrow. So we are speed dating on that one. But some of them take a very long time, because the process of actually writing the CV does sometimes make people think, and they take a break from it and say, I've actually had to have a bit of a reboot here, and I now realise I'm not quite ready. So we sort of park things and we come back a few months later. What was interesting in lockdown is that in March last year, I had a huge number of clients on my books, and it literally split down the middle. Half of them could not contemplate finishing their CV in that degree of uncertainty, and others were the opposite. They were going, we are going to finish this, and I need to finish it ASAP because I need to get applying and whatever. So that really changed actually the time it took, because some of them were accelerated and some of them are still not finished now a year later.
Yeah,
because it changed everything in so many people's words. But I would say, if somebody came to me tomorrow and said, I'm really interested in applying for this job, the deadline is 2 weeks' time, absolutely can do that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. I just thought that might be a useful thing for people to know. So how can people find you and connect with you, Jackie, if they'd like to do that?
They can find me as a very active LinkedIn user. I'm on LinkedIn as Jaqui Winston, and I'm on LinkedIn under my company name as New CV. and they can contact me through email, which is jaqui.winston@newcv.co.uk. Sorry, not Winston, Jaqui@newcv.co.uk. I'm on Facebook, but I don't use it very much because my main target audience, I think, are on LinkedIn. So that's where I put most of my efforts.
Okay.
And so, yeah, those are the main areas of activity. And I have had put the toe in the water with things like Instagram, but if you find me on there, you'll see not a lot going on because I don't have time. But,
okay, so LinkedIn would be your preference, or
LinkedIn, absolutely, yeah.
And feel free to put those details in the chat.
Thank you.
So, Jaqui, it's been an absolute pleasure. Talk stories and people and positive change and all that for ages. But thank you so much for joining me. And I'm eventually we will meet or cross paths in some something, won't we?